From the upcoming book, we chose Play, Raising an Autistic Child to Thrive and Feel Understood. From Chapter 1. At some point, probably about 4 years after our son's brain inflammation, I stopped feeling sorry for us. I began to accept our son for who he was, focusing on how much I adored him rather than constantly worrying about his future. I stopped wondering why this happened and stopped looking for causes or analyzing everything he did through the lens of missed milestones. I stopped frantically searching for treatments and therapies online or religiously reading the various email newsletters I had subscribed to, and finally appreciated who our son was. I moved forward wholeheartedly with a floor time approach and let go of everything else. I made the decision and commitment, and floor time stopped being a treatment and became a way of life.
All of Affect Autism's podcasts are produced and edited by Daria Brown. Please note that the views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved, do not constitute educational or medical advice, and do not necessarily reflect the views of Affect Autism, Daria Brown, nor ICDL and associated parties. Listeners should consult with professionals familiar with their individual circumstances for specific support.
You're listening to the We Chose Play podcast from Affect Autism, where Affect is the #1 tool we use in supporting development through playful interactions. Welcome back, Floor Timers. I am thrilled to have my returning guest, Dr. Emile Gauss, who is the ICDL board president and an international autism self-advocate and researcher based in South Africa. Please refer to the links in the blog post to our past podcasts, A Self-Advocate's Inspiring Journey, and Examining the Experience of Autistic Students in Higher Education. Welcome back, Emile.
Thank you, Daria. It's a major opportunity. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yes, we are discussing the month of April, which is autism awareness, autism acceptance, depending on where you are. And we really want to focus on how it is really going from awareness to acceptance to appreciation to action and inclusion. So, Emile, why is this month important?
Awareness is knowing that autism exists. Acceptance is understanding that autistic people belong. Appreciation is recognizing that the unique strengths and contribution of autistic individuals. But action is where real change happens. We need policies. We need inclusive education, reasonable accommodation in the workplace, general accommodations in civil society, and more importantly, meaningful support systems that don't just acknowledge autism, but actively empower autistic people. And that is where the action comes in.
I know that there is still a big disconnect between what we hear self-advocates talking about in so many new podcasts that are out there and different posts on Instagram. Social media is really active with the voices of self-advocates and what's actually happening in schools, in workplaces, in policy. So bridging those two together will be something that we're going to be watching going forward for sure. I know that in listening to the lived experiences of adult autistics in different podcasts and seeing different things online, it's very evident to me that the idea of autism and the definition of autism, because of the neurodiversity movement, has really seemed to change for a lot of people. What do you see happening going forward where we have people like me who've been diagnosed as autistic versus kids like my son who have a lot of co-occurrences such as sensory processing disorder, dyspraxia, anxiety, ADHD, other things that really do disable every part of every day?
We can see it now in the neurodiversity movement in the 21st century, where there's a lot more parents that are basically doing advocacy for their children, a lot more self-advocates that are talking about their lived experiences, talking at major conferences. And we can also see it in distributing films as well. So there's a lot more awareness that's out there. But what you mentioned to me refers to the biggest misconception about autism. And a big major misconception is that neurodiverse people lack potential. The truth is we think, we learn, and we communicate differently. But that's not necessarily a weakness. And then if we want to refer to theory, this we can also relate to this medical model which we are trying to move away from, moving to more social model, which we do advocacy for inclusion, accessibility. We acknowledge autism and co-orbit uh, conditions such as ADHD, dyslexia, and the brilliance of these individuals, the unique attributes, the talents that these individuals have to cope with their difference and to be able to make a success out of their lives. Over the years, research and advocacy have reshaped our understanding. We now recognize autism self-advocacy as a lifelong neurodevelopmental difference, not something that needs to be fixed. The more we learn, the more we realize that autism is not a tragedy, it's a different way of experiencing the world. But when you shared with me your experience, I want to add also something about context and time that shaped the autism diagnosis and how it shaped our understanding of the spectrum. Autism is not a static concept. It evolves based on context, time, and societal understanding. Decades ago, when you think about history, only children with significant support needs were diagnosed, often under different labels, and we can also go back to World War II. As our understanding grew, so did the spectrum, recognizing individuals with varying abilities and support needs. Diagnostic criteria have changed over the years, removing outdated terms and embracing a broader view of autism. In different cultures and contexts, autism is understood and diagnosed differently, meaning that access to support, acceptance, and identity can vary widely. The key, though, is recognizing that autism is a dynamic concept shaped by both science and society, and more importantly, lived experience, and that we must continuously adapt our approaches to ensure that every person, regardless of where they live or when they were diagnosed, receive the respect and support that they deserve.
And that varies so much around the world. So, Emil, you have experience in the continent of Africa, obviously being in South Africa, as to how disability and autism in general is viewed. Let's talk a little bit about how different countries around the world celebrate this month, because I know that in North America and in the United Kingdom, let's say, there is a strong move for, moving from awareness to acceptance. And that sort of happened really since COVID, I would say. What is your experience of how it's happening in Africa and other places?
Daria, based on my different roles that I play in society, I can answer from a research perspective, but also from an autistic adult's perspective, and of course from a self-advocacy perspective as well. And my big gap that I identified in this field is how research differs from different continents and from different countries. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Many African countries, including South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana, hold autism awareness walks, rallies, and community events in April. You know, Daria, just to give you a lot of information when it comes to the lived experiences of neurodiverse individuals in South Africa, I always start with this, but it's fact. South Africa didn't, the last 10 years or so, South Africa didn't do a proper census of disabled people in South Africa, which means that our research is currently outdated when we look particularly at how many disabled people are in South Africa, how many neurodiverse people are here are in South Africa, and the circumstances. There's a couple of statistics that I also want to share with you. And of course, I always say that at conferences, international conferences, but South Africa, especially in the continent of Africa, we've got the highest suicide rate of neurodiverse individuals in the world. The fact that these individuals do not have a purpose. Yeah, so that's reality. And I think, that is where the big misconception is about Global North and Global South. Because in the Global South, especially in the continent of Africa, we've got a lot of influences that contributes to our understanding. We've got cultures, we've got traditions, we've got religion, and of course, because we are a third world country, our socioeconomic circumstances also influence our family's perceptions. In Africa, we've got filicide, infanticide, where parents will basically implement filicide, where they kill their children due to the misconceptions from family members about their child's diagnosis. There's a big misconception that autism or any neurodiversity, in fact, any disability, is a punishment from the from a higher being. So that's why I say, where we can do awareness and research must basically share this information, because I think that will also equip the global north and global south about the different experiences as well. And I want to elaborate on this on at my conference, at the conference that I'm attending at the end of in the middle of April at the ICANN conference, where I would potentially um, talk about this. And I will also share this in a side session with Prof. Temple Grandin, where we would compare the global north and global south. So this is very important. Interesting fact. Do you know that in sign language, I don't know how it is all around the world, but according to my own knowledge, we do not have a sign in sign language for autism. But I think when it comes to media awareness, we need more talking about the lived experiences of these individuals, especially in those far-reached communities. Many local organizations offer workshops and training sessions for parents, teachers, and health professionals. And I can name you organizations that does it, non-profit organizations. But these sessions focus on early detection, communication strategies, and how to support autistic children in African cultural contexts. And this is where ICDL comes in, when it comes to the training to therapists, teachers, parents on how to form connections with their children so that they can understand their children better.
You brought up a very good point that ICDL trains professionals and helps parents connect with their children, and having parents be able to understand their child better by using floor time, by incorporating floor time, really helps people see the strengths in everybody. And I'll refer to my podcast with Mickey Rowe, a self advocate. Our differences are our strengths. I listened to a podcast recently by two autistic advocates. I will link to it in the blog post. And they were saying that the percentage of disability is about the same in the neurotypical population as it is in the autistic population. And I'm not sure where that statistic comes from, or if they were just making conjecture or not, but the perception of autism is only that small part that includes disability. And I think when you said we're moving away from the medical model of calling it a disorder and thinking about it more as a difference while supporting the disabling aspects that autistic people have, whether it's dyspraxia or dyslexia or all of the things that we talked about earlier, that while it makes it more confusing for some people, I think going forward, it's important to emphasize, because we want everybody to be able to have a place in this world.
Daria, identity is everything. For many autistic people, recognizing and embracing their autism diagnosis or accepting their neurodiversity is a source of pride. It is not just a diagnosis, it's a part of who we are. Understanding neurodiversity as an identity rather than a disorder to be overcome will allow neurodiverse individuals to advocate for themselves, to connect with their community, and push for meaningful change. When society embraces, and I'm going to use the word autistic identity, it moves beyond awareness and towards the true appreciation and action. It comes down to also what's important for awareness, which we advocate for, is the importance of language when we refer to autistic adults. And why is language important? Language shapes perception, and I understand why it's important. Many autistic adults prefer identity first language, such as autistic person, rather than person first language, like person with autism. This is because autism is an intrinsic part of who we are, not something separated from us. Using respectful, empowering language helps challenges the outdated ideas that autism is something to be cured and minimized. When we change how we talk, we change society, and we change how society treats or autistic people. Now you talk about the future, Daria. I think our future needs to include by listening to neurodiverse voices, listening to different neurodiverse voices, listening to non-speaking autistic adults as well, because I feel that it's a community that, in my opinion, it's a community that lacks a lot of awareness, but also more importantly, it's a community that also needs to be promoted for the right reasons to show what is possible. But when you think about general education, schools must prioritize inclusive education, mainstreaming education. Workplaces needs to offer real opportunities, and policies must be shaped by autistic people themselves. Awareness campaigns are not enough, unfortunately, in the times that we live in. We need the input of the community of practice, as I call it. We need governments, we need businesses, we need communities, we need community leaders to implement real measurable changes to ensure that neurodiverse people are not just included, but they are valued and supported. It is a real concern for me that, and we experience it as well, that and there's a big misconception about the capabilities of neurodiverse individuals. And I found that some neurodiverse individuals, or majority, we might not know but there's a lot of cases where these individuals are not being paid the minimum wage because there's a big misunderstanding, there's a big misconception, and in my view, there's a lot of discrimination against these individuals' capabilities, which is wrong, It is against the United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It's against the civil rights movement. It's a form of discrimination. You know, Daria, I now thought them changed my life, and I saw it as a specialist teacher, and I see it now as a trainer of floor time in my own unique way. Floor time is a game changer because it focuses on connection first. Instead of trying to make autistic children fit into a rigid system, floor time meets them where they are. It helps parents and caregivers understand their child's unique way of thinking and communicating by joining them in their world, following their lead, and using their interests to build meaningful interactions. The more we engage in this way, the more we nurture confidence, trust, and deepen relationships. Now, the big question will be, how can we incorporate floor time and how important is it? But let me tell you that floor time is all about connection before correction. Instead of forcing autistic people into rigid expectation, it respects their natural way of thinking and interacting. This approach fosters self-confidence, emotional growth, and meaningful communication. If we appreciate and act on autistic needs in this way, we create environments where learning and relationship can thrive.
The way that people work with autistic people has changed. And it's just so important for people to understand that this month every year really allows us to reflect on the autistic people we know and work with, how they're being included, how they're being respected. Are we giving them the benefit of the doubt? Are we presuming competence? Are we supporting their needs? And how that's going to continue to evolve and change.
As more voices have entered the conversation, more autistic voices have entered the conversation about their needs and preferences. Floor time has evolved to emphasize respecting the child's agency and autonomy. The technique encourages following their lead. This respects the child's own interests as well as their own communication styles, which aligns with this movement, this neurodiversity movement, as well as celebrating differences. But for me personally, the most important aspect, and which I implemented and which I can see makes a difference, is fostering emotional regulation through connection. Now, autistic voices highlight the importance of emotional understanding as well as authenticity. And floor time has adapted by prioritizing these elements. As our understanding has deepened, we are fostering and we are advocating also for self-expression and the exploration of identity. It encourages the development of communication in ways that feels comfortable and meaningful to the autistic individual, allowing for self-advocacy, awareness, as well as a strong connection to one's authentic identity. And if you accept your identity, it comes to self-acceptance, but also you can cope with your difference and you can cope in society.
The framework helps people make meaning of how to do that with each individual that's so different. One thing that I think makes Floor Time stand out so well is that transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary aspect that's been there from the beginning. Dr. Greenspan was so wise in surrounding himself with all of these experts who, had specialization in, whatever, sensory processing, sensory integration, in, how to connect with people emotionally, like psychologists, educators, how to include floor time in education and bring in movement into the day, and not having everybody have to conform to a certain way of learning. So this whole multidisciplinary aspect of that, along with this framework, just makes it so adaptable to promoting development and everybody's potential.
It's all about connection. And by using play and meaningful interactions to foster engagement and emotional development, recognizing that true learning happens when the child feels connected, valued, and understood. The focus on relationships is the key because it teaches children how to interact with others in ways that are natural and emotionally meaningful. But coming back to our theme, and the reason why we are talking today is primarily on awareness raising towards neurodiversity, but also more importantly, respecting neurodiversity. And I can firmly say that ICDL DRR Floor Time respects neurodiversity while acknowledging that autism is not something to be fixed, but rather in a different way of experiencing the world. The framework does not push children to conform to neurotypical expectations, but instead encourages them to express themselves in ways that make sense for them.
And while you're speaking, I'm just pulling up a quote from my book that's currently being released and published, which is entitled We Chose Play: Raising an Autistic Child to Thrive and Feel Understood. And I'm going to read the beginning of chapter 3, which is entitled The Role of the Caregiver. One of the greatest insights in parenting an autistic child is that often we are the ones who need the intervention, not the child. The overwhelming focus on the child can cause us to forget the impact we have on them. And I think, Emil, that is what the strength that Floor Time has, is really modifying ourselves. And as practitioners say, their therapeutic use of self to really understand the child. Thank you for all of this input. And as we discuss the importance of celebrating autism awareness, acceptance, action for the month of April. And good luck at your conference in Florida at the ICANN conference.
Thank you very much, Daria. I really appreciate it. Yes, it's a big conference. And of course, as the ICDL president, I'm looking forward to contribute to discussions and also forming connections, and more importantly, to emphasize the importance of the importance of floor time and the importance of patience, understanding, and individualized approach to meet the unique needs of every child. And that's, of course, the foundational structure that can impact the development of every neurodiverse individual.
And you're such an important example of that, Emil, because again, in our first podcast, you talked about how you didn't speak verbally until you were 15 or 16, and how you communicated with, your arms, especially when you're angry and things like that. And people really did not see the potential in you, but your mother did. And through that connection and that understanding and creating that emotional bond and really presuming competence, you now are in your 30s, you have a PhD, you're married, you are really an important self-advocate voice in the world to show that we should not discount children who don't appear the way others do when they're growing up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dario, for that kind words. But you know that my support that I receive now, this unconditional love that myself and Sammy receives from our mother figure, plays a very important role in myself and Sammy's lives. And when it comes to support, I always say that as a family, we came up with the concept of creating an ecosystem because I believe that building a solid support system is our way of functioning. And of course, we can understand that the autism diagnosis is lifelong, and one needs a continuous support system in order for one to cope with everyday life. And also being in an unfamiliar environment with unfamiliar expectations and unfamiliar people in that particular environment that can affect one's behavior, one's functional abilities, and one's coping abilities as well. My lived experiences is not someone else's lived experiences in a different part of the world. And therefore, the more voices we have, we can get rid of this misconception. And by understanding more, by doing advocacy more, and by understanding different people's expectations, and by understanding different people's living circumstances, that is where where we can make a difference.
Thank you so much, Emil, and hopefully everybody can share this podcast and keep the awareness and acceptance and appreciation moving towards action through their own efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria.
Thank you for listening. This episode of We Chose Play was made possible with the generous financial support of Affect Autism's members at patreon.com/affectautism and of the International Council on Development and Learning, ICDL.com. If you liked this episode, please share it with someone, like and subscribe, sign up for the newsletter at affectautism.com, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Instagram.
Until next time, here's to choosing play and experiencing joy every day.
Affect Autism, in its 10th year of providing free supportive content for your DIR journey. Want more? Consider joining the DIR Parent Network. Join a community of like-minded parents where we can support, learn, and thrive together. For more information, check out the parent menu at icdl.com or the events menu at affectautism.com.